Hey guys, check out my new store on Etsy called Nina's Nightly Comforts, where you can find everything from men's t-shirts to women's cozy pajama dresses, men's and women's tank tops for those warm nights, throw pillows, a warm and toasty fleece blanket for those cool fall nights that are yet to come, a mug perfect for tea, coffee, or your favorite beverage, and last but not least, a limited supply of specially handcrafted by me dream catchers to capture all of your nightmares that my creepypastas will leave you with. Everything to get you comfortable and in the right mood to listen to your favorite creepypastas. You can find the link posted below in the description and also in my community tab. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to keep me in your nightmares. To humans, I live a relatively boring life, but to a being like myself, I am perfectly content with what I do. I am a tree, and yes, believe me, I know just how stupid that must sound. You're probably wondering, what is this story possibly going to be about? I mean, after all, what can a tree have to say? All they do is sit there in the middle of the woods, or maybe even a forest, for their entire life, watching as the seasons and weather continue to change over and over again, as birds build nests in their branches, lay eggs, and live their own lives, as families of squirrels climb up and down them, playfully chasing after one another, then stop to take a short break to gather acorns that have fallen to the ground beneath them. It's common knowledge that trees lose their leaves and become bare every winter, but not many people know that trees actually keep themselves alive during the bitter cold. We go through a process that's similar to hibernation called dormancy. Basically, what that means is that everything within me slows down, my metabolism, energy consumption, and growth, and that all starts when I lose my last leaf and fall asleep. Then when my very first leaf sprouts back up the following spring, I awake from my months-long slumber and enjoy life until it's time for the cycle to begin again. Not very interesting, I know. But one other thing that people don't realize about trees is that they have secrets too. And boy, do I have one hell of a story to tell. It all started when a little boy wandered into the woods one beautiful sunny summer day. Now, I've seen kids before from time to time because, from what I can see over the canopy of my fellow trees, the spot in the woods where I'm located isn't very far from what humans call houses, and since I can see a few of them, maybe there's even what they call a neighborhood nearby, but I can only guess. So this little boy comes skipping through the woods, wearing a pair of dingy sneakers, a backwards baseball cap, a pair of blue jean shorts, and a white t-shirt. He looks to be about maybe 8 or 9 years old. When he notices me, he stands on his tippy toes and begins to reach for one of my branches. I have one low-hanging branch that I always thought was a little odd. I find it a little funny when he grabs a hold of it and pulls himself up, because I always thought that it wasn't good for anything. But now that he's done that, he's able to reach all of my higher branches, so he begins to climb. He spends about an hour there that afternoon, climbing from branch to branch. Then finally, I guess he must get tired, because he sits down and lets his legs dangle down over one of my other branches, as he begins to trace his fingers over the rigid patterns in my bark. Soon after that, a woman comes walking toward the woods, calling out the name Shane, and the little boy makes his way down to my lowest branch, and then leaps down and goes running toward her. To my delight, he returns every single day after that. I never realized how lonely I had felt until he starts coming around all of the time. Since trees don't talk to each other, I only have 3 other friends. The sun, which keeps me warm and gives me energy. The rain, that keeps me hydrated. And the wind, that keeps me cool and helps me move around a little to stretch my branches. Sometimes when the little boy comes to visit, he'll climb me, each time going higher than the time before that. And then other times he'll bring his lunch in a brown paper bag and enjoy it as he sits in the shade that my leaves and branches provide. Or he'll lean up against my trunk and play with what look like to be littler humans. even though humans themselves are little compared to us trees, and he himself is even littler than the humans that I've seen. But he calls these even littler humans action figures. I know it sounds silly, but I start to feel like we have a bond because of the fact that he comes straight to me every time that he comes into the woods, and he walks right past all of the other trees. I know it's only probably because I have one of the lowest hanging branches that he can actually reach, but if that's all I need to make a friend, well, I'm okay with that. And then right around the end of summer, I believe it's mid-September, he brings some of his friends to the woods with him one day. They are all carrying a bunch of pieces of wood. Well, everyone except for Shane. He's carrying what humans call tools. One of the kids that he's with calls the tool that he's carrying a hammer, and then he also has some sharp, pointy things that they call nails. Shane and one of the other kids, a little blonde-headed boy with a face full of dots, pull themselves up using my low-hanging branch, and then the other boys begin passing the pieces of wood and the hammer and nails up to them. The blonde-headed kid, who Shane calls Philip, holds each piece of wood in place while Shane hammers a nail into each corner. I flinch each time that the hammer makes contact with a nail, because not only does it hurt like hell, but it's agonizing to watch pieces of my bark chip and fall off. They say that they're building something and that it's going to be great. I wonder what it will be. They return over the next couple of days and add more onto it each time. And when they're finally finished, they call this contraption that is now permanently attached to me a clubhouse. At first, I was mad at Shane, thinking, why would he hurt me? But then I found out that he didn't do it to hurt me. The little humans made this thing so that they could spend even more time with me. So now his friends have become my friends, which couldn't make me happier. They spend the last few weeks of summer hanging out in there almost every day. Then the weather starts to change. It begins to get cooler, and after a while it starts to get dark shortly after Shane comes home from school. I don't know what that is, but I've overheard him always talking to the other little humans about it. That's when he starts to come to see me less and less. I only get to see him after every 5 days that the sun wakes up. If the weather is nice, he'll come and sit in the treehouse and do what he calls stupid homework. Then winter comes, my last leaf drops, and I fall into my annual slumber. When I awake the following spring, the first thing I see is Shane and the other little human with the spots on his face. I believe his name was Philip, if I remember correctly. They are both climbing my branches, while the other little humans sit in the treehouse and talk. Shane is higher up than he's ever gone before. When the two of them climb back down, Shane asks, "What happened? I thought you were right behind me." Philip replies, "I was until you started to go a little too high." "Oh, so you got scared," Shane says as him and the others laugh. I laugh to myself with pride because it brings me such joy to see him growing up. And there were many more good memories like that over the course of the next few years. But that pride soon turns to animosity when as time goes by he starts to get older. And I guess that maybe he finds better things to do than hang out in the woods with me all of the time. He still comes from time to time. He doesn't climb me like he used to, and he's gotten a little too big for the treehouse. Plus, over time, the rain and snow has caused it to start falling apart, so I don't really think it'd be safe to even go inside anymore. But he'll talk on a little device that he holds up to his head for hours, called a phone, as he sits under me or leans up against my trunk. And sometimes him and one or two of his other friends come stand around me and smoke what they call bud. But I don't understand why they don't just get it from me. I mean, I have plenty of fresh buds that they could have picked. And sometimes Shane and I will have long conversations. Most of the time he just tells me about his day. I remember once that he said something that really made me happy. He told me, "It's so nice to come here and just enjoy some peace and quiet. It gives me time to think." I wish that I could talk back to him and tell him how much I miss him when he doesn't come around for a long time. I wish I could respond to him when he says that he had a bad day and tell him that everything will be alright. But of course I can't do that, because I'm just a tree after all. Then one day, I'd say he's about 16 now, he brings a female human with him into the woods. I assume it's the same girl that he's always talking on the phone to, and when he calls her Katie, that confirms my thought. Shane uses his pocket knife to carve their initials into me, and then he puts a heart around the S and K and a tiny cross in between them. The girl gets all giddy when he does this, but it makes me feel the complete opposite. I endure the pain, even though it hurts like hell. The only thing I can think of to compare it to is when one time that Shane was out here smoking with his friends, one of them showed him that they had gotten something called a tattoo. They said that it had felt like their skin was being ripped off, and that's exactly how I feel at this moment. After that, he brings her back occasionally. They like to walk through the woods holding hands and just talk, or sit beneath me and put their faces together all of the time. But then, all of a sudden, they both just stop coming. And then one day, he shows up by himself to clear his head, and that's when he tells me, "I can't believe she cheated on me. I want to forgive her because I love her so much, but I just don't know if I can." Then he sits there in silence for a while, holding his head in his hands before finally getting up and walking away with tears in his eyes as he mumbles, "I don't know what I'm going to do." A few days later, he returns, this time with Katie, so I assume that this means they work things out. She runs her hand across the spot on my trunk where Shane engraved their initials and closes her eyes, I'll bet reminiscing about the first time he brought her here. A moment later, she pulls him close and whispers, "I love you," then puts her face up against his, and then the two of them begin undressing. Then they make their way up to the treehouse. It's a good thing that Shane decided to fix it up a little and bring that ladder not too long ago, because I don't think Katie would have been too happy if she had to climb me just to get up there. Once they're out of sight, all I can hear are noises that remind me of when I've seen animals mating. Then a phone vibrates. I can feel the vibrations through the treehouse on my bark. And then a huge argument ensues when Shane starts shouting, "Are you kidding me, Katie? You told me that you would stop talking to this guy. I thought you said that you wanted to be with me, that you wanted to work things out. This message says that the two of you were just together last night, and we've been back together for over a week now. I do want to be with you. I have no idea what that message is all about," she cries. "You're a liar. You have messages here from midnight last night between the two of you. He invited you over to his place, and you reply, 'Okay, I'm on my way.' What in the hell is that all about? I can't believe a word that comes out of your mouth. You're a goddamn liar and a cheat." "Wait, I'm sorry. Shane, please, let me explain," she whimpers. Then I feel a big vibration as Shane screams, "Get the hell away from me." And then the next thing I know, there's nothing but silence as Katie's naked body comes tumbling backwards, flying out of the treehouse. The next sound I hear causes a chill to run right through me, and my leaves begin to shake as though a powerful breeze just blew past. But there's no wind in the air tonight. Shane comes rushing down the ladder and races over to where Katie's lifeless body is lying on the ground, next to the rock that she banged her head off of. "Oh my God, what did I do? Katie, I'm sorry. Please, please wake up," he begs as he lifts her into his arms and violently shakes her. Then he proceeds to gently wipe the blood from the gash on the back of her head. He sits there for a while, just holding her, apologizing over and over as tears stream down his face. I can see that he feels incredibly horrible for what he's just caused to happen. But then all of a sudden, he goes from feeling guilty to asking himself, "Now what am I going to do?" Suddenly he throws on his jeans, sneakers, and t-shirt, then drags Katie's body behind my massive trunk so that it's out of sight before he goes darting away. Once he's gone, I just sit there thinking, I can't believe that I just witnessed what I did. This is so out of character for Shane. The Shane that I know is loving, caring, understanding, and kind. He would never do something like this. But then I have to stop and ask myself, was it just an accident? I mean, I didn't see exactly what happened. She could very well have fell. But Shane said, "What did I do?" didn't he? You know what? That doesn't matter. It was a mistake. It had to be. And people make mistakes all of the time. That doesn't mean that Shane isn't a good boy. Just then, Shane comes racing back into the woods, carrying a long stick with what looks like a metal scoop on the end of it. He wipes the sweat from his brow and then begins to dig a hole, deep down beneath my soil, and he doesn't stop until he hits my roots. That's when he throws the long stick aside and pulls Katie's body over to where the hole is, closes his eyes for a moment, and then bends down and whispers something into her ear. Finally, he caresses her face, then begins to cry all over again. After kissing her gently on the forehead, he tosses her body along with the blood-soaked rock into the hole that he's dug for her, and then he proceeds to bury them both. He finishes right before the sun starts to come up, and just as he starts to walk away, he pauses, then turns back toward me and says, "Take good care of her." He doesn't return for a few days after that, and when he finally does, I quickly come to realize that I'm not the one he's talking to anymore. I think that the only reason he's even started coming back again is because he feels like this is the only way he can still be close to Katie. And by the way that he speaks to her, I can tell he truly misses her. And my assumptions are confirmed when he returns late one night with the same long stick that he used to dig the hole he put her in, and he begins to dig her body back up. Well, at least that's what it looks like he's doing at first, until he suddenly stops, sits down, and then gently lifts only her head up out of the dirt, so that it's now lying in his lap. For the next hour, he sits there in silence, crying, caressing her face and smelling strands of her hair. Then he reburies her, and after that, he takes the long stick and puts it in the treehouse. But then he continues to return every few nights over the next few weeks, only to do the same thing. It becomes routine for him to dig up only her head, sit there and talk to her, kiss her, and smell her, then rebury her and leave again. Then one night, when he comes and digs up just her head once again, a loathsome rancid odor fills the air. By looking at her, it's quite clear that decomposition has started to set in. Parts of her corpse are devoid of any skin and are being invaded by burrowing insects. Without eyelids, her milky blue eyes stare straight up into the dark starlit sky, while her lipless mouth hangs wide open. Shane is obviously disgusted and offended by the foul scent, because he quickly covers his nose and looks away as he starts to gag. But after a moment, he finally gets a hold of himself, walks back over, then kneels down next to her and pulls his pocket knife from his back pocket. I wonder what in the world he could possibly be doing. Then he cuts off a piece of Katie's hair before burying her once again. Months go by, and I'm beyond shocked and horrified when the next time that Shane returns, he has a new female human with him. It's like he forgot all about Katie just like that. And what in the world would possess him to bring another female human to a place that he was so obviously ashamed of? That to me is a little strange. After bringing this new female human here a few more times, who I come to learn that her name is Pamela, one night they return and Shane lies out a blanket beneath me for the two of them to sit on so that they can look up at the stars. After a while, Pamela decides to lie down, and then she cuddles up next to Shane, closes her eyes and smiles as she listens intently to him talk. I have to admit, when he was coming here all of the time to talk to me, I always enjoyed listening to him talk too. There's just something about his voice. Its gentle calmness is so soothing and relaxing, kind of like a lullaby. Just then, Shane stands, pulling me out of my own thoughts, and grabs a hold of Pamela's hand to help her up. Pamela says that she's cold, so Shane pulls her closer, and just as he wraps his arms around her, a look of surprise crosses her face as she lets out a sudden yelp, and then her eyes roll back in her head and her body goes completely limp. Shane catches her before she can fall to the ground. I stand there confused, not understanding what just happened. She was fine only a few seconds ago. Then I become even more perplexed when I see a look that I've never seen on Shane's face before. A huge demented smile spreads across his lips. It's so big that I can see every single one of his teeth, and for a second, seeing him so happy makes me feel the same way. But there's just something about it. Even though it makes me feel good for only a few seconds, after looking at it a little longer, I start to get a horrible feeling, one that I've never felt before. And that's when I see him pull his pocket knife out from between Pamela's shoulder blades, and he lets her body slump to the ground. I start to panic, thinking, no, this can't be happening, not again. Then as I stand there thinking, what can I possibly do to stop him, but already knowing that the answer is nothing, Pamela begins to dig her nails into the dirt and slowly pull herself along, trying to escape. But I think that she's hurt worse than she realizes, because she collapses again right away, her face falling right into the dirt so that now she's inhaling it. She lifts her head, her cheeks now stained with muddy tears as she begs Shane to stop. But he just hovers menacingly above her with that same smirk on his face, rotating the knife in his right hand as he slowly approaches her. When he gets close enough, he grabs her by the ankle, drags her over to him, and then sits on top of her chest so that she can't move. She attempts to fight back, trying to scream, but he shoves one hand over her mouth, which in return causes her to start clawing at his face and arms with her long, sharp fingernails. She gets him good once or twice, leaving a deep, bloody scratch on his left cheek. That seems to really piss him off, because now he drops the knife, grabs both of her arms with his other hand, and grips them tightly together, holding them above her head. When she finally calms down a bit, I think because she's so exhausted and has gotten tired of fighting, he lets go of her arms, and then in a split second grabs the knife that is now sitting at his side and slices her across the throat with it. Blood splatters everywhere as she gasps for air and grabs at her neck, trying to stop the bleeding. When she takes her last breath, Shane gets up, drags her body behind my trunk, and then digs a hole right next to where Katie is buried, and snips a piece of her hair before tossing her inside. Once he's filled the hole back in with dirt, he climbs the ladder to the treehouse and leaves the long stick inside, and then before he leaves, he walks over to me with his knife, and right below, where he carved Katie's and his initials inside of the heart, I brace for the pain as he carves a small line into me. Once he's gone, I'm still so horrified and in disbelief over what I just saw that I can't even begin to think about anything else that night. I can't fathom any reason at all why he would have felt the need to do that, besides that maybe him accidentally killing Katie must have done something to him, changed him, made him feel good inside, and gave him the urge to do it again. Maybe this girl hurt him just like Katie did. I mean, I don't know for sure, because he hasn't mentioned anything to me about her. I didn't even know that she existed until he showed up here with her. But either way, this was clearly not an accident like Katie's death was. And he doesn't come back to visit Pamela like the way he did with Katie. That's how I can tell that her and her death meant nothing to him. It had absolutely no effect at all on his conscience. And when he does finally return months later, lo and behold, he has another female human with him. This one is named Claudia. He brings her around a few times, just like all of the others, and then decides that one day he wants to strangle her when she least expects it. Then just like the others, he cuts a strand of her hair and buries her along with his other two victims. Just before he leaves this time, he once again hides the long stick in the treehouse, then carves another line next to the other one that's already there. A week later, he shows up with another, kills her, and then buries her with the others. But before he does, of course he clips a piece of her hair, and then he carves a third line into my bark. I'm starting to think that for some reason he must really like their hair. I mean, why else would he take a piece from each of the female humans? A little over a month goes by. It's the middle of autumn now, and thankfully Shane hasn't been back since, well, you know. I can't deny that I miss him. After all, as deranged as he may seem, he is my friend. It's been raining a lot lately, and I know that the rain is good for me because it helps me grow and flourish, but my roots are the only thing that seem to enjoy it. My leaves don't like to be soggy, and when my bark gets wet, I start to feel cold inside, and it takes days for it to completely dry out. Then one beautiful fall evening, the moon is shining bright in the dark night sky. It's a little windy, causing my remaining leaves to shake and blow wildly, when all of a sudden I see two dark shadows approaching the woods. They are walking hand in hand, and the closer that they get, the moon starts to reveal their identity. A feeling of dread washes over me when I realize that it's Shane and another female human. I know that there's only one reason he could possibly be bringing her here, and my thoughts are confirmed when she tries to leave and he grabs her by the arm to stop her. She must sense that something's wrong because she starts to scream for help, but only manages to get out one ear-piercing shriek before Shane grabs her by the throat, slams her to the ground, and then proceeds to bang her head up against my roots repeatedly, over and over again, until her face isn't even recognizable anymore. And then, just like the others, he snips a piece of her hair, shoves it into his pocket, and then digs another hole and buries her next to the others. Afterward, he carves yet another line next to the other three that are already there. I'm starting to feel like I'm taking part in these killings too, since I haven't done anything to stop him. And the feeling only magnifies when he returns yet again months later with another female human. Unlike the others that he's brought here, this particular one appears to be very off balance. She's stumbling around, barely able to walk, and she's talking kind of funny. As he approaches the woods with her, I can see that he's trying to hold her up, and when they finally manage to reach me, she falls to the ground, then leans up against my trunk as Shane lights a cigarette. She lies her head back and closes her eyes as she breathes in the cool night air. When Shane notices that she's not paying any attention to what he's doing, he starts to make his way over to her. He's now looming above her, and she doesn't even realize that he's there. And when she finally does, it's too late. He's already holding the long stick high in the air, and he brings it down with such force an echo rings out when it makes contact with her face. Immediately, he brings it back up and whacks her again and again until he's certain that she's dead. If I had a stomach, I'm sure that it would have dropped from the amount of shock and many other emotions that are coursing through me. I watch in horror, unable to do anything, as he drags her bloodied, lifeless body behind my trunk, digs a hole, and then cuts a strand of her hair before tossing her inside. Once he's finished filling the hole back in, he pulls his knife out of his back pocket, carves another line, and until now I hadn't known what the lines meant, but now as he carves the fifth one diagonally through the other four, I finally realized that they are tally marks. I remember them from when he was a little human and he used to have to do stupid homework. He said that they were to keep count of things, so he must be keeping track of his kills. A chill runs through me as he props the long stick up against me and then nonchalantly walks away. A few weeks later, my last leaf falls. I enter my slumber for the winter, still not quite knowing what is going on with Shane. I just can't believe that that first female human who hurt him caused him to change into this. When I awake in the spring months later, the first thing I usually notice is the nice weather, flowers blooming, the sun shining, that type of thing. However, the first thing I realize this time is that there are more tally marks carved into me. 2 more to be exact, which tells me exactly what Shane's been up to the last few months while I was going through my dormant period. Over the next 4 years, I awake to the same sight and find even more tally marks on my trunk, and through the spring, summer, and fall months, I have to go through the torture of watching him kill even more female humans. I can count that he's killed 19 of them so far, from the tally marks that he's left on me. I used to feel like I was special to him, but now all I feel like is that I'm being used as a demented scoreboard in a sick, twisted game. Just like the game that they call basketball, that I've seen him watch on his phone countless times. I couldn't tell you how long it's been since the last time that Shane has been here. I just know that it's been a very long time. This is the longest he's ever been away. I guess honestly it's not a bad thing. My hope is that he's changed and gone back to the Shane that I remember. Years go by, and I think about Shane from time to time. I think about him and how I can't believe how evil he became. He was such a good little human when I first met him. I try to forget what he's done and remember the good times that we had together, like when he would just sit and talk to me. But I mean, it's pretty hard to forget that you have a bunch of dead bodies buried beneath you, intertwined with your roots, which are the same things that have been feeding me nutrients all of this time. Then one day I'm shocked beyond belief when Shane comes back. He's a grown man now, and at first I'm overwhelmed with emotion because I'm so happy to see him again after so long. But when I see that he's with another female human, all of the horrible memories come flooding back, and I just know that he must be bringing her here because he's planning on killing her. Maybe not right now, because after all, it is daylight, and all of the other deaths took place at night under the cover of darkness. They walk up to me hand in hand, her beaming bright smile spreading from ear to ear. She looks so happy to be here with him. When he starts to tell her about how special I am to him, I'm confused, because he never talked to any of the other girls about me. He tells her how he used to come here as a kid, and how him and some of his friends built a treehouse here, but it's long gone now. Then out of nowhere, two little humans come running over, a little male and female. They leap up into Shane's arms, and he kisses each of them softly on the cheek, then tells them that he's going to build them a treehouse one day, just like the one that he used to have when he was a little boy. Pointing up at one of my broken branches, the little male human asks, "Daddy, what happened to the tree?" That's when I realized that he must have mated with this female human, and that these tiny humans now belong to him. Shane glances up and replies, "This tree has been here for a very long time, ever since I was a little boy. But don't you worry, I'll cut that branch down so that it doesn't break off one day and hurt someone." "But won't that hurt the tree, Daddy?" the little female human questions. "Oh no, this is one tough tree. It won't feel a thing," he answers, as he rubs his hand across the tally marks that he carved years ago. I find out that Shane left this place for another place called Florida, but he came back because too many people were getting sick there, and he has just found a house somewhere nearby. The female human and two little humans start to come back to visit me nearly every day. The little humans, who I've come to grow very attached to, are called Gabriella and Carter. The female human is Amy. The little humans love to climb me, just like Shane did when he was younger. They also love to sit beneath me, while what they call their mom reads to them or tells them her own stories. Amy herself loves to come here alone sometimes when the little humans are at school, and she'll just sit here in silence for hours, enjoying the peace and quiet, or other times she'll write in an empty book, or read a book that already has stuff on the pages. 2 years go by. Shane builds a treehouse for the little humans, just like he said he would, and I start to spend even more time with them, more than I ever did with Shane when he was little, because Amy brings them out here every day. I am so relieved and happy that Shane has changed and found someone that he could be truly happy with. I always knew deep down that he wasn't a bad person. The weather has been getting colder lately, and one by one my leaves have started to fall, which means that winter is right around the corner, and soon enough I'll be falling asleep for my annual slumber. I'm surprised when Shane comes out here one afternoon, because even though he built the treehouse, that was the last time that I saw him. Every time that the little humans ask their mom about him, she tells them that he's at a place called work, and he seems to spend quite a bit of time there. I guess that's why he hasn't had the time to cut down my broken branch like he said he would. He takes a seat beneath me, looking very sad and depressed, and starts smoking. I can't begin to imagine why he seems so upset when he has such a lovely female human and two wonderful little humans. But then he proceeds to let out a sigh as he softly pats me on the bark and says, "I know I haven't been out here to talk to you in a long time, old friend." That makes me happy because I miss our long talks that we used to have too, but I still wonder why he's so upset. Then he continues, she's cheating on me. I saw the messages between her and some other guy, and I've been thinking about what I should do. There's only one option I've been able to come up with. I can't stand the sight of her anymore, just like I couldn't stand to look at Katie. Immediately I think, oh no, I can't let this happen again. And that's when I think back to just a few days ago when Amy came out here all by herself, whispering on the phone. I overheard her telling whoever she was talking to, "I'm so excited about Shane's surprise birthday party. I ran into one of his old friends, a guy named Philip, the other day at the supermarket and mentioned it to him, and he gave me his number. He's going to help me surprise Shane with a special cinnamon strawberry crumb cake. He said that's what Shane's mom always used to make for him every year for his birthday before she passed away. And Philip even said that he's going to help me get in touch with two of Shane's other really close friends that he used to hang out with when they were all kids. He has absolutely no idea that I'm doing this. He's going to be so surprised." I remember the conversation so well because I only ever saw Shane's mom one time when she came to get him from the woods when he was a little human. And then I remember how he came here and cried and told me she had gone to heaven. And he did used to always brag about how good that cake was to his friends. And when I heard Amy say this, I thought how it was going to be such a great idea and that it would be a nice surprise. And how the name Philip rung a bell. Now I'm finally realizing that it's the same little human that had all of those dots on his face, that I now know are called freckles, that Shane used to play with when he was a little human himself. And how I wished that this thing called a party was happening right here in the woods so that I could join them in the fun. With all of my power, I try to communicate with Shane and tell him that he's wrong about Amy, that she would never hurt him. The guy she's been talking to is just Philip. She's trying to do something nice and make you happy. But to no avail. I have to do something to stop him this time before he does something that he's going to regret. But before I get a chance to come up with anything, a few nights later, Amy comes racing into the woods barefoot late one night, and to my horror, Shane is right behind her, with that same demented smirk that he had on his face when he did all of those horrible things so long ago. He catches up to her, and they begin shouting back and forth at each other. He screams, "Why would you do this to me? You're just like all of the others." "Will you just let me explain? You're not even listening to me," she desperately cries. "There's no need to listen to you. I heard all of these lies before," he tells her as he pulls out his knife and stabs her in the leg. The wind is howling, drowning out the sound of her screams. Already knowing what is about to occur, I decide that I have to do something to help Amy. And that's when I come up with an idea. I don't know if it'll work, but it's worth a try. As they stand there beneath me, still arguing, Shane suddenly shoves Amy and she falls to the ground, angering me even more. Then he hovers there, menacingly above her, gripping his knife. As my friend the wind picks up speed and howls all around me, I can tell that he's trying to help me. And even though as tense as I am, watching this all unfold before me, I try my best to loosen up every part of me so that the wind can blow through my branches as easily as possible, swaying me back and forth. With my body making all kinds of moans and groans, I finally manage to muster up just enough strength to knock my one broken branch loose. It slowly breaks off with a loud crack. Shane's unable to hear it snapping because of how loud the wind is, but Amy, who is still lying on the ground, sees it falling. As he swipes at her with the knife, she kicks him backwards, and then at the very last second, he realizes what's happening, but is unable to move out of its path in time, as it impales him right through the body. He cries out in agonizing pain, and then a moment later, he starts to stumble, and then collapses to the ground. Amy watches in shock as Shane dies right there before her very eyes. A sudden sadness washes over me. It tears me apart thinking about the fact that I just had to kill my best friend. But then that sadness quickly vanishes when I think, I just stopped him from hurting anyone else. This is what I should have done all of those times before. I guess it's a good thing that Shane never got around to cutting my broken branch down. Thank goodness this is finally all over. Just as Amy starts running out of the woods, screaming for help, I feel myself starting to get drowsy as my last leaf blows back and forth in the breeze. It's only hanging on by a thread. Once Amy's out of sight, just then, Shane suddenly gasps for air, then reaches up and pulls the branch out of the side of his body. He tries to get up, but stumbles a few times before catching his balance. As he leans up against me, he taps my trunk with his blood-soaked hand and says, "She almost got me, buddy." "And thanks a lot, you weren't much help," he jokes, as he winces in pain and then tosses my broken branch aside. My annual slumber is usually something that I look forward to, but as I watch Shane hobble out of the woods after Amy, dragging the long stick along behind him, the last thought that I have as I start to fall asleep is that hopefully when I wake up in the spring, the first thing I see isn't a newly carved tally mark in my trunk. Don't forget to subscribe for new stories weekly. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.